Hello and welcome to the Eve Space Project. So, this is episode 2, and at the end of episode 1 I made mention that I had unlocked all of the science on this particular tier. Now that isn't actually true, I still have a little bit to go, so I thought I'd show you how I'm doing this. It's slightly cheaty, but I might as well explain. So I've got a rover here. This is part of the Wild Blue Industries, the Pathfinder, nope, not Pathfinder, the Buffalo mod. These crates are part of the Pathfinder mod. And from the Mole mod here, which they all integrate, they're all Wild Blue. If we go into the experiment lab, in here I've got 2 scientists. I have Bob and Padrin. I've hired 2 more Kerbonauts, 1 engineer, not 1 pilot, and 1 scientist. And all we're doing is we have the 2 of them in this Mole mod, and we're just going to start collecting science. Now, you basically pick up a science point a day. So if we bring up the resources just so you can see what's happening, I'm just going to move this round slightly so that I'm getting a good amount of sun. I'm just going to park it over here because we're quite close to the equator. It should pass overhead, so I'm just parking out of the way of the VAB so that we get sun coming straight overhead. And then all I'm going to do is time warp. Now if you time warp forward, this has a lot of life support on board in these cans. As you can see, it's going down slowly. My electricity goes down overnight, but not much. And you're just watching the food slowly depleting day by day. But I'm picking up a whole load of science here. And at the same time, I should start my research kits slowly dropping. You basically do it until you run out of either research kits or pack life support supplies, food, water, oxygen. So I'm just running it down, and as you can see there, we are just about out of research kits. And then all we do from here, and this is a key point, you have to transmit this science. So we have a local antenna on the actual crew cab, and you can time warp through the transmission, but I don't think it does too much of a difference at the high end, so you just do it like 10 times time acceleration. But there you go, I got a quick extra 100 science. So with a little bit of grinding, you can up your science from that. It is a little bit cheaty, but it doesn't give us any money. It actually wastes a bit of money to do it. Not much, but unlocking the parts is one thing, actually affording the parts is something else. Now there are a few other ways around about this. You can do mining or etc, but this is my initial method of getting some science. So without further ado, I shall go on and show you what else we're doing and unlocking with this science. So now that we have some science out of the way and we've unlocked some of the parts, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to start pulling contracts, and some of the more interesting ones that I'll show you, and I'll sort of skip over the test this at the launch out, etc. So what we have here is we have a contract, and this is doing half of it. Now I have a contract to take somebody into orbit and a contract to take Arbor here, who's in the middle seat, just up into space. So all I'm doing is I'm making a small vehicle that's just going to boot straight up, and we're trying to do it as economically as possible. I'm not recovering parts at this stage because, well, I forgot, to be honest. But we're just going into space high enough that we complete the contract, then coming back down, smooth landing, and then we're going to give it a shot for going to orbit. Now, unfortunately, I am not very good at this, and I'll say this many times throughout playing Eve, but I enjoy it nonetheless. So we're going to give it a few shots. Now, as you can see here, we've managed to get him to space, but unfortunately we have to recover and then complete the whole contract for it to happen. As you can see there, somebody else is going to go into orbit. So, with much finagling, I give it a second shot, taking the other guy up, and we go for orbit. Now, as you can see here, I'm not getting too big. If you can see sort of steam trails, or I'm not quite sure what they call them, the vapor trails that are coming off of the rocket, then you're essentially going a bit too fast and friction's too high. And as you can see there, I had no chance of getting this up into orbit because it was a little bit heavier with what I'd done to it. So I need a little bit more science to unlock some more parts, and I came up with this little rover. Now there are some parts in Wild Blue Industries, I'm not sure exactly which mod adds these, but there are some air intake parts for some of the special resources you can use, and I try and make this little rover that will harvest them. However, yeah, it doesn't work and it doesn't get me much money, so I decided to go a different route and just go and pull some missions where I'm gathering science from areas around about the KSC. So that's exactly what we have going on here. We have a lovely little rover, some jumping about, grabbing some science here, there and everywhere, and trying to get as much as possible, while at the same time getting some science from other places, using the methods that I've showed. So a little while later we have some science, we recover it all. We have to recover the Kerbal and then recover the vehicle because it's not sitting solid, good old KSP physics. But then we get some more engines, slightly higher ISP engines, and we go for orbit yet again. Now this time we are just doing, as you've seen, we've got into orbit before, but this time we're carrying some of the science equipment, so this is a little bit of a heavier ship. And I'm trying to get more science so that eventually I can launch multiple people into orbit. So this time we managed to get into orbit fairly easily. Obviously we're not carrying any passengers, but we're out there. And we pick up a little bit of extra science as we go. Obviously you can see us here just burning for our orbit. And with that, we get enough science to actually unlock some more of the tech tree. Now at the same time as this is going on, I'm also using the other method where I've got people sat in a little machine just crunching through science and occasionally jumping back to it and reporting the science back to the KSC. But even with that science, it's more efficient time-wise to get the science this way. The other method requires a lot of waiting, a lot of time warping through things, and I think by the end of this I'm actually about 4 years further forward, so it's taken a long time with time warp to actually get into it. So it's not an efficient way time wise, but at the same time you require so much science to get into orbit on Eve that it was pretty much my only method. But we get back to the KSC, we go into the science bay, and as you can see here, we had already unlocked everything, but now we're a little bit further on. We upgrade the science centre and we're into sort of tier 2 of the science, although as you can see here I'm still fairly low back when it comes to runways and things because I don't have much money to spend on them. So yet again we're going out for more science, but this time I decided to take a different route because I noticed another biome fairly close. So we shoot down towards the shores, and actually out in the middle of this lake in front of me, as they call it, the Explosive Sea or something like that, there is actually a different biome right in the middle of it, so I decided to come up with this boat to do it. But as you can see here, I've had a bit of problems with broken wheels and it's caused me a lot of different issues. So with a little bit of time warping and finagling, we managed to get it sort of straightened out, and then as you can see, this is not a fast process. I basically went and had dinner and left it on 2 time warp to try and get out to the middle. But eventually we get there and we gather some science and we can use this to unlock a few more things. And also at this point I've got a little thing running where I think it's 12% of science gains are turned into money. So for every 1 science that's used, I get around 2,500, I think it is, of what I call kuros. But as you can see here, we have another little vehicle that is again another science vehicle, and then this, which was the majority of this playthrough time for filming this video. I think it was actually about 8 hours or so that I flew this little thing about. And basically tried to grab every piece of science that I could from low atmosphere and from the ground. Occasionally I'd land it on the ground and then use that to pick up the science and move a little bit further forward. This thing requires so much power to run, as you can see by all the solar panels on it. I don't have any sort of reactors or anything like that at this stage, so I'm trying to use everything that I can, and I'm trying to gather as much science as possible, picking up all of the little bits that I've missed here and there. But in the end it does leave me better off. And I'm not sure if you can see by the biome, but I'm actually at the opposite side of the planet here. There was a little bit of flying, I left it overnight and things like that. But we picked up some science, enough to unlock the Estonian. Now the Estonian is one of the Wild Blue Industries DSEV mod. It is a multiple person command module. I think it's 6 or 7 people it can carry. So I decided to pull a whole load of contracts for space tourism at the one time and launch them all at the same time. And as you can see there, I nearly knock everybody out with the acceleration of the main stage. But we managed to get this up into orbit, and if I do say so, this thing just looks brilliant. I really do like the Estonian. And it's got the base there, which is the, I think it's the Juno lander base. I can't remember exactly what it is, but I know it's roughly used for that. And oh god, I wish this thing had tweak scale on it, the actual base, because I'd use it in so many other different things. It is integrated. There's 2 sections to this, which are a storage container, which is the bit you can see there with a ladder on it, and then the heat shield at the bottom, which also carries a little bit of fuel in it, has a central place for an engine, as you'll see here as you come back in, but it also has integrated landing legs. And if you're not using this mod, seriously, it is brilliant. Give it a shot. But what I have to do when I'm re-entering here is I have to keep it tilted. As you can see there, I'm quite worried about the G-forces being experienced, and I did quick save and reload this because the first time I knocked everybody out, and I found if I just kept it tilted slightly, I could buff it off the atmosphere and just get through without knocking out any of the tourists. Obviously, if you knock out a tourist, you haven't returned them safely and you fail the contract, and just one fails the entire contract, which is a problem. So, given that worked, and I had a little bit more Delta V than I expected, I thought I'd launch a second one, but I'd launch the drone version of the Estonian. Now, you can see somebody there, that little person isn't actually in the Estonian. There's a little cargo hold below it. And we're burning for orbit with a little bit of a station, because one of the other contracts that I pulled earlier on to get extra funds was to put a station in orbit. And because I've got the power from these engines, I'm using tweak scale as well, by the way, but I have the ability to throw something heavier up here, so I decided to do it. So here you see a little Estonian drone module and a little section of a space station. This is the first space station that I've come up with. But if you notice, I am not in orbit yet, so my plan was to get high enough that I could use this drone module to push the space station up into orbit. And with all of the finagling that you saw here, because I don't have the stuff, I'm not sure if I have the stuff in MechJib, but I'm not using it yet because, yeah, there are certain bits that I'll cheat in and certain bits that I won't because it feels bad. However, I'll push this up into orbit just now. And as you can see there, I actually dip back down towards the atmosphere and have to burn to try and get it up and above. But we managed to get it stabilised. And this presents us with her first station in orbit. Now, it doesn't complete the contract for the station because it needs to have facilities for 7 or 8, I can't read this on the rendering screen, but it needs to have facilities for many people, and I don't get the facilities for those people until this command module is expanded. But as you saw there, I pulled another contract which was just transmitting data, and with transmitting this data for 0 science, I complete the contract, so every little helps. So after this, I decided to go for my last launch. Now, I'm running low on funds at this point, which is it's been a problem all the way through, but it's becoming a big problem. So as you can see here, I go for a lighter module and I actually take off 2 of the boosters because I reckon I can just get to orbit with the engine on the second stage. As you can see there, I keep bringing up the recovery system, and the problem is that I'm not putting enough parachutes on to recover the boosters, so I'm actually losing 50,000 per booster every time I don't recover them, which is, well, it's a problem as experienced by SpaceX, and I believe also by the Space Shuttle. But I'm getting a bit of a problem here, and I'm running low on funds. However, there is a silver lining, in that this load is, we have the Kerbals, but as you can see there are some little things strapped onto the side. I have equipment strapped onto the side of the Estonian, and also the bottom section doesn't have fuel in it this time. It actually has more equipment in it to expand that section. So there is fuel in by the heat shield, but not as much as usual. And I think this is actually set up, the bottom section is set up for what they call bootstrap, so it carries some equipment, it carries some fuel. It's a very good system to get a base up and running if you're using Pathfinder and things like that. Now, I have made a horrible mistake here, and this mistake is I don't actually have the ability to set targets on the map screen because I haven't upgraded the tracking station. So this is a manual thing, and I'm running a little bit long in the video here, but I wanted to show this because I was really proud of this. I managed to get close enough to set a visual target and actually rendezvous without maneuver nodes. Once you get close enough, you just have to set your target and then keep an eye on your prograde and retrograde as opposed to the target, and try and slow yourself down and make it match. And obviously on the bottom right of my HUD I've got better burn time, which gives us a good help when it comes to the interception times. I've used that often. Sorry, I can't speak English, I've been learning another language. But I've used this that often, again, sorry, that unfortunately I don't remember what it was supposed to look like, but I install this every time I install the game. It's one of my base mods regardless of what else is installed. So we get close enough, there's a little finagling as you can see there, but eventually we get close enough, and funnily enough this isn't costing me as much mana propellant as I expected, but we get docked, and once we get docked that gives us the ability to expand our state. Now I have noticed at this point, and I'm sure Angel will watch this and see, but I have noticed that although you require equipment to expand the station, it didn't seem to use the equipment. Now I'm not particularly complaining at that, because yeah, I don't see why you would need to use a spanner and the spanner would become destroyed in creating it, so it makes sense to me. But just in case anybody else notices that, I think that's a good thing for these modules, whereas if you're building something, the equipment is consumed in the process. But once we get this all sorted, I start rearranging the storage facilities. Now the drone Estonia module that's on the right hand side of this just now, it just contains life support so that this station runs for a long time. So I want to get this thing researching as soon as possible. So I rearrange it so that it can store a lot more of the research kits that I can use to make science, and because it's in space I think I should get a little bit more science as it goes. But we have a couple of scientists that have come up, who have been transferred. We have our space tourists, and with a little bit of rearranging it becomes time to depart. So unfortunately I am still an amateur at doing this, and I do it on the dark side of the planet with no light mod. But we hit for deceleration, and I'm trying to get it close to the KSC, but unfortunately, yeah, I'm still bad at this. But yet again, we give this a shot where we bring it in and tip it forward, just so that it sort of bounces upwards in the atmosphere and it reduces the acceleration. As you can see there, my G meter goes high, and yet again, I'm checking all of my little space tourists to make sure they don't get too badly mullered. And with a little bit of the engine to try and slow us down, we bring this episode to a close. So, thanks for watching, hope to see you next time, and bye!